guys, welcome back. We're here with a very familiar face, Gabriel Rene from Versus, now known as Versus AI. As a reminder for you, the ticker, if you're American, VRSSF, Canadians, VERS.NE, though we might touch on that. Gabe, thanks so much. Always excited to talk about AI.
Kevin, it's great to be here.
So maybe one little thing I'll kick off before we go into a little introduction, just in case somebody is new to your story for the first time. You guys trade on the NEO. It's a Canadian Tier 1 exchange, recently purchased by the CBOE, which is a much larger US exchange. So they're actually rebranding the NEO to be called CBOE Canada. I'm just wondering, Gabe, do you have any thoughts on what that could mean for your stock or the trading symbol anyways?
Well, I do know that we have seen quite a bit of traction in the US over the last few months. There's been a lot of action. I think as the AI story has sort of exploded here, it's very appealing to US investors. So even though it's trading not on the CBOE here in the States, it's trading over the counter. There is a lot of demand coming from this side now. The CBOE, which is Chicago Board of Exchange, has been kind of laying out a bit of a master plan lately. And you've seen a handful of activities that seem to expand their footprint to a global footprint. So we've seen Canada, they've got trading in Europe, they've got trading in Australia, we've got trading in Japan. So I would not be surprised to see a scenario where at some point here, listed companies on the CBOE are able to trade globally 24 hours a day. We're also seeing scenarios where, CBOE has invested in digital assets and tradability of digital assets. And so I kind of think they are an organization that is looking at themselves as the next NASDAQ. How do we focus on 21st century asset classes and organizations, and even the demands and needs of traders, which generationally have shifted, as we've seen with things like Coinbase and Robinhood and others. So I actually think they're taking a very cool, scrappy approach. Yet to see how that will impact Versus directly, but I look forward to watching that game play out.
Certainly. And for those of you watching at home, currently the ticker symbol is the same, VERS.NE. If for any reason that does change due to this organizational shift, this acquisition, we'll obviously keep you informed. So something to keep your eye on. Skipping back into the story, it almost feels silly to do it at this point because this is obviously you and I have met so many times, but let's just say somebody is watching this for the first time. You are a new face. Can you give us like a quick little elevator pitch introduction? What is Versus? What are you guys all about?
Yeah, Versus is a next generation AI company, which might sound weird because AI feels like brand new for most people. But the current approaches to AI are extremely limited. They're based on essentially a handful of companies, 4 or 5, that have the ability to really take massive amounts of big data and turn this into these large AI algorithms, which we've seen with ChatGPT and the rest. We're building a next generation platform for AI called KOSM that allows you to generate artificial intelligent agents from your data. So instead of just being knowledgeable about public information, which is essentially what these other systems are quite good at, you'll have your own artificial intelligence agent solutions that can be developed. And so KOSM is essentially a platform for developing artificial intelligence solutions for anybody.
And recently, you recently did change your name to Versus AI. I think obviously to better hone in on what the direction of the company is. As a shareholder, obviously excited to see that, just knowing the pure marketability and level of interest that's going towards AI stocks. Just do a quick Google trend search and you see AI stocks, it's exploding. So I couldn't help but be selfishly interested in that name change. But can you talk a little bit about, maybe I just answered it, but what are some of the reasons why you guys did choose to change your name?
One reason, which is to make people understand that we are building AI technology. The company was Versus Technologies, which could make it quite broad in terms of its interpretation. And we've been building, artificial intelligence solutions based on cognitive computing frameworks, which are out of the sort of world of neurobiology and neuroscience, as opposed to statistical modeling, which is the current approach to AI. We've been doing that for over 5 years. So we've been, AI has been at the center of what we've been developing for half a decade, making it easier for retail investors to be able to find us, look for us when they're looking for AI to invest in, was just a very logical decision. And so from a branding perspective, we're still just Versus, but much easier to find in the AI space now because of the name change.
I think that makes sense. And okay, so continuing on that, AI is trending. Obviously, ChatGPT, you hear about it everywhere. I was even seeing Sam Altman talking about OpenAI on the news this morning. I know you have lots of thoughts about this, so I'm going to leave this very broad and just let's talk about where the future of AI is heading. It's obviously gaining a lot of popularity, but there obviously is some controversy as well. People talking about regulations. Can you give us a big kind of your thought leader in the space? Where do you see all of this going?
Well, maybe let's start with where we've been and where we are now. So, the field of AI basically emerged with the concept of computers. So you go back to like 1950s and Alan Turing, and we're trying to, crack Nazi codes and stuff, and trying to figure out how to do code breaking. And they, Turing built the first real massive computing system as an attempt to try to help really win World War II. He also posed a question at the time, which was become a classic, called, can machines think? And this resulted in something you may have heard of called the Turing test. The Turing test, which has been around for about 70 years now, is essentially the idea that can I talk to a chat bot, an AI on the other side, and mistake it for a human after some significant number of questions. Now, Turing never specified what number of questions for how long, and so this has been a moving target for some time. But we've all seen AI been implemented over, the course of our lives, even just the last 10 years, with things like, say Siri or Alexa, Google's ability to kind of interpret what to serve us up in terms of the search results, or seeing autocomplete as we're trying to finish a sentence in our email or on our phones. We've seen autonomous cars in the form of Tesla start to drive themselves. We've also, saw Watson kind of come out of the IBM camp making claims of, this is going to be able to cure cancer. And for the most part, up until Christmas of 2022, all that kind of sucked. Siri's an idiot. Alexa's annoying. Teslas keep crashing into things no 17-year-old kid would ever crash into. Watson was sold for parts. I mean, it could win Jeopardy, but it couldn't cure cancer. So this was a real challenge, teeing up the AI, sort of arc, where really it looked like we were going into what was considered the third AI winter. There'd been several sort of multi-generational, waves of, hey, it's the AI spring, it's all going to change everything, and it didn't change very much. And then all of a sudden, ChatGPT and this new class of what are called transformers. So ChatGPT stands for General Pre-trained Transformer. Transformer is a type of AI, and it's actually embarrassingly simple. So the basis of a transformer, of which GPT is a class of, there are others like Midjourney and DALL-E, and now Google Bard has just launched, and we've seen others that essentially are what are called generative AI. They can generate content, text, images, artwork, now video, audio. I don't know if you've heard the Drake Weekend song.
Yes, I have actually.
Sounds like a phenomenal hit song by essentially AIs replicating their voices.
Yeah.
So these are kind of pattern recognizers that can mimic and parrot human ability to generate content, and in a very believable way. Oddly enough, they do it in the exact same way, essentially, as autocomplete or autocorrect on your phone. So it's just trying to guess the next word. So if I said, hey, my favorite dessert is definitely mom's, hot apple, you would not guess truck, right? That would be incoherent.
I hope not.
It's probably, you're probably not even going to go with strudel. You're probably going to go with pie, right? But it would be within that sort of range of things that would follow from apple, right?
Right.
And so the attributes, like the idea that birds fly, or that cars drive, or that people eat, are like mathematically closer together in more sentences when they're digesting all this information from the web. That just becomes a statistically more likely thing to do. So when ChatGPT is predicting the next word, or Midjourney is predicting the next pixel over, there's no real context or concept of the bigger picture. There's no bigger picture. It's just essentially like a giant lookup table that is able to correlate statistically. The output of this is fascinating, and what we've seen is this massive breakthrough where 100 million people in 2 months are using ChatGPT, completely shifts the entire search industry. Bing kind of pops out of nowhere after putting $10 billion into OpenAI, the company that invented GPT-4 and then built ChatGPT as an application on top of that. And just last week, we saw Google with their big I/O conference announcing Google Bard, and all of these parties integrating AI into their products. Everything from Microsoft Word to like now Google, Google Sheets and Google Docs, and Gmail will start to type for you, and PowerPoint will start to generate images for you. And so that's quite powerful, and that's going to accelerate all kinds of capabilities. On the flip side, there's questions now, as we've seen, Elon Musk and Jeffrey Hinton, who was the former, basically the inventor of this category of AI, who was at Google, who left a couple weeks ago to say, I'm worried about the existential threats here. Along with a handful of other folks have kind of raised their hand and say, we need everything from a ban to, calling for a timeout. And we've seen the Biden administration in the U.S. I was on a call recently with some government representatives from Canada. There's the AI Act out of the EU, which just popped up also about a week ago. These are things that have been churning in the background for years, but suddenly kind of found an imminent need for and calls for regulation. We just saw Sam Altman in the last 24 hours sitting in front of Congress, and most of the CEOs from the big companies were all sitting in the White House a couple weeks ago. In fact, even now calling for regulation. So even the companies themselves are saying, we want to know what the rules are in order to be able to comply, because they understand sort of three main things. The power of these technologies as they currently stand today are capable of generating things that normally humans did. This means that the disruption in terms of the amount of content that can be generated, we went through an age where large media corporations were essentially the content generators. We went into the Web 2.0 age, and suddenly it's user-generated content. And you and I are sitting here, and now you're a media tycoon, right? I mean, anyone can have an audience, and we all now have variations of these. That's a complete new phenomena. Well, now imagine AI-generated content, where you can generate 1,000 times more content, or 10,000 times more content. And so there have been predictions that maybe by 2025, like 90% of all content on the web could be generated by AI.
Wow.
Given their ability to write anything, the fact that these systems can be directed to say anything, and that they can then show images and even video. We started to see, we saw a recent one just a few weeks ago about the Biden administration that was all generated imagery and video that was of scenes and scenarios that didn't exist, that weren't true, that to the human mind appear to be real, right? And so misinformation and or just content generation in general is one big question. What sort of regulations should there be? Can there be? Do these things have to be labeled? What's up there? The second one is clearly economic. What happens to the jobs of people that are creating content, that are making stuff? And what happens when you democratize that so that, like on Midjourney, there's, 10 million people paying $10 a month to be able to generate artwork that looks like the highest quality art, you've ever seen. More art's been generated in the last 4 months than in the entire history of humanity by more people. Wow. At a higher level of quality. So you get quantity and quality. What does that do to designers? What does this do to writers? We're already seeing these issues here in Los Angeles with the writer strikes. So what is the impact on jobs? If, Andreessen Horowitz, who's the big A16Z, is one of the $30 billion VC fund here in California, out of Silicon Valley, so that they think that the impact of this is somewhere between AI being able to disrupt all software, so between all software and all human activities, somewhere in there.
Okay.
Right? So
Wow.
Everything could be disrupted that we're doing with, and And it's a little bit hard to imagine this, except if you go back in time and you think about electricity and electricity's impact on everything over the last 100+ years, you start to get an idea of what this might look like. So as it stands right now, just this month, we've seen massive calls for explainability. How do we get explainability from these systems if someone is harmed by them? If one of these systems makes a recommendation for, you get denied credit, and perhaps it's racial bias that's in the data. So now you should have the right to be able to say, I've been discriminated by the system. Give me the explanation for how it arrived at that decision. So there's all these questions around, privacy and security, but explainability ends up being the big one. And this is kind of a hint of where are we going. The AI Act has a section called Article 68C. This is like a few days old that essentially is talking about somewhere between 10 and $30 million fines per incident, or 2 to 6% of the company, depending on whether it's a low, medium risk, high risk, et cetera, sort of system, and whether these harms, the scale of the harms. So this is a real hurdle for the current approach to AI. And so the big question, which I'll pause on here for a second to get your take on it, is that it's possible that these systems actually will not be able to be deployed at the scale that we're talking about, given the current approach and arguably necessity of their transparency and explainability and the ability to have certain levels of trust around privacy and security of these systems. So that is the big unknown that we're all rolling into. Hottest technology in history, $15 trillion market opportunity as per McKinsey, an impact on GDP over the next 7 years by the end of the decade. And yet, risks to, personal risks, economic risks, environmental risks, and perhaps even existential risks. There have been a handful of people saying this could get out of control. It could turn into the sort of Skynet scenario that our sci-fi stories have sort of suggested, right? So it's a powerful moment in time, and we kind of stand on the precipice, I think, of a few different roads out of here, right? Or roads to the future.
So that's wild. One thing it makes me think of, so you're talking about regulation obviously forming now. It kind of takes me back to, early-ish crypto days, 2017, let's call it. I know that's not considered early by some people, but that's early enough. And there was kind of this period of time where it's Wild West. And I mean, to many people would probably argue it's still kind of like that, but it's taken so long for the regulation to catch up and understand the technology that there's this kind of chunk of Wild West time. Where do you think we are in terms of like that for AI? Like, do you think regulation is going to move faster because AI has been around so much longer? Or do you think this is going to take like years and years and years before any of these rules are implemented?
Well, I mean, some of them are being in the process of being implemented or considered for implementation. So often how this plays out is that, which is not quite the case with crypto, although we saw a lot of action and activity. We also saw the sort of fragmentation, both even, internationally, different laws and policies and sort of pro or anti takes on crypto. And we've also seen just confusion inside countries like the United States, where you've got different regulatory bodies that are arguing they have jurisdiction over the category of an asset that may or may not apply to them. Is it the SEC? Is it, there's a bunch of debate over who has regulatory powers and how when they apply. What is the IRS's perspective on this? And, is it a commodity, or is it an asset, or is it an investment? And so these sort of things are similar in the sense that the frameworks that regulation used, those maps don't apply to the new territory in the same way. Something goes like, there's this old joke, well, it's an old story. It's a kind of an Indian story of the blind men and the elephant, right? There's like 5 blind men, and they all come across an elephant. The elephant's been terrorizing the village, and these blind men are supposed to sort of figure it out. And they each like get a part of the elephant. So one gets an ear, and one gets grabs onto the trunk, and one grabs the tail, and one grabs the leg, and they say like, oh, it's, what do you got? And it's like, oh, it's like a sail. It's like oh no, it's like a tree trunk. Oh no, it's a rope. Oh no, it's it's like a snake. And so independently, they have no idea what an elephant is. And so this is kind of the problem that we have right now, is a bit of the blind man and the elephant problem, where there is an elephant here, but the regulations think it's one thing or the other. And so in that way, I think it's quite similar. There is a bit of a difference as well, though, in that with crypto, it wasn't really big companies. And here you've got Google and Microsoft and Meta and Amazon, right at the center of this, and regulatory pressure will work, right?
Sure. Fair.
So secondly, I think that the real question is, can they comply? Mm-hmm. And right now, the answer is no. There isn't an approach. Imagine you had 100 billion cell Excel spreadsheet with a bunch of joins that some machine algorithm had done between any cell and any other cell. And your job was to go find the Nazi in there and take it out. It's really hard to do. And so now, can it be done? Perhaps. There are some promising research approaches, including OpenAI used GPT-4 to kind of look at the outputs of GPT-2, and it seemed to be able to figure out some explanation. Is the European Commission or the FTC or any other regulatory body going to say, oh, your internal audit is fine, that's good enough for us? Oh, it's on a system that's like 4 years old, that's basically been deprecated, that no one's using. So then, and by the way, isn't the current system biased in ways we can't tell? So how do we like, who's watching the watcher, right? Like this is a real problem. So yeah, I think the typical approach when we've seen things like this, which I would say are not quite like crypto, although there are some, it does rhyme, is that in the case of the AI Act of the EU, they'll probably lock the language down next year, and the lobbyists and everyone will be trying to like move words and make sure that these companies want to make sure that they have a path to compliance. Otherwise, it's a really dangerous game. There'll be a grace period. The EU will say 2 years. These companies will argue for 4. They'll settle on 3 to get their act together. And during that time, they'll spend billions of dollars to try to figure out how to become compliant. So the first thing is like, how do they get the bar at the right place? The next is how much time can they get to try to become compliant? And then they got to figure it out, because there isn't really a path to it. And in the end, it's TBD whether that will work or not. I mean, we've all kind of seen GDPR. It's been sort of like it's an attempt to protect everyone's data, but it's a user experience nightmare. Right. So but often where the EU goes, the rest of the world follows, because they tend to take a stricter approach around civil liberties related things, regulation. So this is a really wild defining moment, and I think that the impact of this is going to alter the path to how we get to AI that is actually useful, beneficial, and can be compliant. Now, as Versus, we just announced last week our third phase of a 5-phase project with the European Commission we've been doing since 2020, called Flying Forward 2020, which is essentially how do you translate the laws in 5 different countries in Europe into something that is not only explainable, well, let's say not explainable to humans, but explainable to AIs, so that they can operate relative to the constraints set up in the laws. Right. And so we are, as I understand it, the only group in the world that's able to deploy these systems in such a way that they're able to translate the laws into something that AIs can understand, that we can then understand what decisions were made around that. And so our approach is based on a very different approach to the rest of the market, which is really focused on using big data, trying to understand patterns, extract those patterns, and apply those patterns. It turns out, though, that the real world doesn't operate like this, and whatever your best decision in the past was not necessarily the right decision in any given new situation.
Right.
I'll give you an example. Like, imagine you train AIs that are powering cars to stop at stoplights. So they've got cameras, they can pick up red versus green. They're actually better at it than we are, right? And then there's a power outage in the whole city. They've never encountered that situation. Do you remember driving when you grew up, you were sitting in cars, you understood the background context, you understand all the sort of the underlying structure of the world and the physics of how it operates, and you know, but when you were driving later, with some point in your life, you probably came across some point in time where then the stoplights were out. Mm-hmm. And everyone at that has to just kind of like figure out who's going next and who's not.
Never
right?
smooth. Never
right?
smooth.
Sometimes you got to make eye contact. Sometimes, you know, but people adapt because they're able to extrapolate from the sort of principles of the operation into a scenario that they haven't encountered before. And this current approach to AIs cannot do that. They can't learn anything new. When it's like a map, when they print it, right? They ship it out, like that's it. GPT-4, that's all it has. It doesn't learn anything new. And so we need new approaches to AI, and that's what we've been pioneering. So there's two major sort of differences. Number one is we developed our artificial intelligence based on a set of sort of modeling standards. How to build, how to teach AI human concepts of human knowledge and human experience, and translate that in a way that they could model the world in the similar way that we do. And because of that, we're translating it in, we can also then read it back out. And so we can understand the decisions they're making. The second part of this is build a different kind of AI that doesn't learn off of lots and lots of data, but learns off the data you give it, and then can learn by testing it out in the world and then improving it in ways that we couldn't, and explain that to us in new, powerful ways. So this is where we think things need to go, right? Today, there's like two paths. You essentially have free market. Let these companies do whatever they want and don't regulate them. We all want the benefits of AI, hit the gas, right? You've got the government approach, which is no, we don't want them to do things that could cause harms, or, you know, have issues with just only a handful of companies centralizing this power. Hit the brakes, right? And yet there isn't like any sort of middle path. So the middle path has always been standards. So today we have Wi-Fi and Bluetooth and HTML and, you know, standards for every electronic device and every telecommunications network, and that operate the basis and backbone of the internet and the World Wide Web and that we interact with today. And those global standards organizations like the ISO, who's the International Standards Organization, or the IEEE, who does it for electronic systems, you know, have hundreds of thousands of members, scientists, engineers, you know, regulators, and they all come together to basically debate the merits of a standard. And what this does for industry is it lets like companies build Wi-Fi routers because they know exactly what the specification is that they need to follow. And so everywhere you go, Wi-Fi will work interoperably for everyone. At the same time, they can compete on other features without having to compete at that level. What we need is a similar approach for AI that allows AIs to be registered when they're these sort of big systems, that allows AIs to methods for modeling information that are interpretable and explainable, and that then can be used to be interoperable and scalable, and that aren't then just a function of 5 companies that have the power to do it, but give every single individual the power to sort of generate their own artificial intelligence solutions, and enable you know, safety precautions and compliance that ensures that those things can't get out of hand or break the law. And so essentially that's what Versus is doing. These guys are renting you their AI system, right? What we're doing is giving you KOSM as a platform that lets you build your own AI. Let businesses build their own AI solutions. Let individuals customize their own AI solutions. And what's great is that you've got an AI that not only doesn't require all this big data, but we'll get smarter and smarter and smarter every single moment of the day, and learn more and more how it can be a better service to whatever the goals that you laid out, while ensuring that those goals, are not ones that can cause scalable harm and that have to be compliant with the laws of the land. Just like essentially what we have with cars today. We have to register the cars, we have to drive them in safe ways, and that's what now we need to extend that to AIs that are going to be driving the cars. And so we think that KOSM and our approach to AI is actually the future that of artificial intelligence. Allows for scalable, widely deployable. Users do not require special sort of skills to be able to do this. It applies to large governments and organizations and just small groups and individuals, and it lets you generate your own AI that gets smarter over time, as opposed to just this sort of frozen giant block model of an AI that only like 5 companies in the world can deploy, while ensuring that it's explainable and interpretable, can be aligned with our values, our laws, and our goals.
Well, okay, that's a perfect segue into the next thing. I really want to talk a little bit about GIA. So for those of you, watching at home, you're not as familiar. Artificial general intelligence is kind of like this holy grail. So a quick Google search and you'll get up to speed and you'll see what I mean. So let's talk about this, general intelligent agent. That's GIA, what I mentioned. That's kind of like a code name, if you will. You've recently announced it, but why don't you give us give myself and the viewers at home like a high level overview of like what exactly is this, and where do you see yourself kind of taking this product essentially?
Well, what we've largely seen come out in just the last 4 months, and let's be honest, this is the industry is like not even half a year old yet.
Right.
the background technology is 60 years old, but the industry has really just emerged in 2023. We're not even through the second quarter, so there's a lot of uncertainty, even up to the point of what we're talking about around regulations. When we look at the product offerings, which are starting to roll out, you can look at ChatGPT as a good example. It's largely been chatbots. So you can have extended conversations with these things, but they're operating on public data, meaning like you can ask questions about the War of 1812. You can ask it to write you a poem about your love of Toronto in the style of Edgar Allan Poe, or as a rap that Drake does, right? And so it can generate this content. Write me an article on a particular topic, write me a business plan, write me a customer service script, and these are powerful capabilities. But what it can't do is these things have no memory, like zero memory, right? So there's a sort of illusion of memory, which is when you're talking to ChatGPT that it's keeping track of what you're saying. Now, ChatGPT in the app is sort of doing that, but what's really happening is ChatGPT is an app that's essentially a website that is calling the GPT-4 model, which is sitting on a bunch of servers burning like power of a small sun. And every time you ping it, you might think that you're just sending like the next sentence, but it's sending everything that it and you have said during that entire chat. So as it gets longer and longer, it's sending that. It sends this amount, and then it sends this amount, and then it sends, So it's compounding the total amount of compute power required for every single sentence or request that you have. Why? Because it has no memory. And so all that's happening is it's just resending everything and then predicting the next word and the next word and the next word mathematically based on everything that's been said so far, slightly contextualized, but whatever the last thing that you said. So the first problem is that it doesn't have a memory. What does that create? It can't operate on your data. So you have, Google just came out with, hey, we're going to add Google Bard to Gmail. So when you're typing Gmail, what they didn't say was, we're going to have an agent that crawls all your emails and is able to basically provide you information on, imagine if you just had analytics of who you sent, what you responded to, what you didn't respond to, the tone of it, be able to ask any question across any set of apps, not just like Gmail, of any of your data, and you're starting to see what the benefit of something like GIA would be. GIA is designed to be a personal, intelligent agent for you as an individual or for your business, and essentially operate on your data, not on the world's data. So 5% of the data on the web is actually public data. 95% is behind a password. So all of your emails, all of your bookmarks, all of your, everything in every app, all corporate information, right, on every server, on every drive, that is just not accessible. It doesn't know anything about that information. So KOSM is designed to basically set up a service for you that hosts your data on your behalf, meaning it's not my data, it's not our data. I don't want access to it. I don't want to look at it. I don't want anything to do with it. We're going to host it in a way that it's owned and controlled by you. And then you're able to generate an agent from that data that can offer any sort of analysis, recommendations, explanations, predictions, planning, simulation, or even take actions on your behalf. So the idea of Gia for you as a personal agent would enable Gia to not just respond to emails, which it certainly can do, or texts on your phone, which Google can't do because that's probably on an iPhone. So it's a cross-platform, sort of universally accessible agent. You could access it on your laptop, on your computer, on your phone, on your smartwatch, whatever you want. And it's going to basically have this profile, this memory, your knowledge base about all the information that you want to provide it. And then it'll be able to provide you that sort of analysis and recommendation, but it'll also be able to go do things. So instead of you ordering food from DoorDash, it will order it for you. And it's going to know what your dietary restrictions are and what your preferences are. Instead of you ordering an Uber, it will know what your location is. It's going to know your preferences, your routines, your schedule, access to your calendar, and start to say things like, oh, you're coming to town to meet me. You and I have a reservation. Your flight is delayed. It notices, it contacts me and says, Kevin's not going to be there in time, but I know he loves this breakfast spot. Are you cool to meet there in the morning? I'll book the reservation, and then sends a text.
Wouldn't that be nice?
Updates you when you land. Yeah. So imagine the power of not just analysis of anything you have, but the power of automation. Now, this automation is not limited to digital systems, of which our agents are designed to be fluent in, but also in physical systems. So our agents are the kind of thing, because they're also adaptive and learning and getting smarter all the time, that then developers should be putting into cars, that you want to put into a smart refrigerator, that you want to put into IoT devices or drones or robots. And so we see a world where our KOSM platform and the agents that are generated from this data are specialists in whatever domain of information or domain of activity that they operate under, in ways that are compliant, in ways that are transparent, in ways that are explainable, in ways that are constantly learning to get smarter and smarter and optimize over time. And so the power of that, now distributed in such a way that anyone can essentially have that, we think is a radical optimization capability. And it's a little more akin to being like a power company, right? People can make billions of different products that plug into walls, from computers to lamps to TVs to toasters. What we want to do is make those smarter computers, smart lights, smart toasters, smart cars, and essentially all of this is just to make you more smarter and effective in the world. And so that's the idea behind where we're going, and where we think the industry is going.
It's incredible, and I had no idea that the split between data behind a password was 95% versus 5% public. That's kind of mind blowing to me, but I guess it makes sense when you think about it. So, okay, well, there's kind of one main thing I want to finish off with before we go into a bit of a conclusion. Like, you've announced a lot of partnerships lately. Two specifically jump out: SVT Robotics and Simwell. Do you want to kind of talk about that a little bit? What does it mean? What are you guys doing? Just give us a bit of color around those partnerships.
Yeah, so this is mostly associated with the work that we've been doing with our Wayfinder agent. So Wayfinder is a KOSM agent that essentially helps route warehouse workers through warehouses. So it's sort of like Waze for warehouse workers. So instead of an Uber driver who may, not have any knowledge of the city that they're driving in, but can do it more effectively than the local cabbie, because the map is, in real time able to sort of provide them routing, from one restaurant to another, to your hotel, or, to the airport. We do the same thing by having our system map the environment, all the locations of the inventory of the products, and then give the worker a handheld application inside of the device they already have that then talks to them in their ear, speaks to them in their language, and then gives a personalized routing instructions for those workers, right? So instead of Gia being personalized, agent for you and your data and your information as an individual or for your business, this applies to these workers. And so we've seen, 35+% productivity gains in the warehouses with the early clients that we've deployed. And then that's essentially a human worker. Well, AI navigation is actually a very new thing in the supply chain space. You think about Amazon and these other environments, but that's single-digit percentage of most of the warehouses, hundreds of millions of square footage around the world, actually billions of square footage. And so optimizing and augmenting human workers is important. With SVT robotics, they're like, how do we optimize and augment robotic systems? Now today, each of these robotic systems are trained on their own data. They have a black box understanding, and they don't know where each other are, and they can't share information. And they don't have any they might have like motor skills, but they don't have like a smartest path through the warehouse. So our integration with SVT Robotics allows them to start implementing our Wayfinder 2.0, which is just starting to roll out, in such a way that their customers, which are all the largest robotics providers in the supply chain, to start to use Wayfinder with the robots in order to deploy them in various sort of manufacturing and warehouse and port and supply chain environments around the world.
Well, that's particularly cool. And what about Simwell?
Simwell is a simulation partner, so they're able to run simulations. So you can see how this would be helpful if you're trying to plan a certain set of activities where inventory should or shouldn't go. Where should we put stuff in order to get the fastest routes? Simwell is integrating with our KOSM platform in order to be a partner that can demonstrate simulation capabilities that then also will allow these large sort of supply chain customers to be able to simulate large scale activities that then can trigger certain deployments of human or robotics workers that are AI driven.
And so it's always so fascinating. I feel like every time I talk to you and have a conversation, it's just such a look into the future that just some of these things, you forget that a lot of it's happening now. And we're so much further ahead than I think a lot of people realize. And just spending a moment with even something basic like typing in a query into ChatGPT, and you realize what's possible. But where you guys are going with this is on such an industrial scale that it's like, okay, it's cute that I can write a Drake song. Actually, no, it's very cool that you can have Drake sing a song to you. But some of these applications, like these are the things that are going to really shape the next, 20, 50, 100 years. Like things are changing fast. And I always value these conversations with you. So I ask you this every single time, and I'm going to ask you this again, just because I know the company evolves. I love finishing with a bit of a shameless pitch or the investors watching where you're at now. What's the pitch right now? Why should somebody be investing in this stock? And you know what? Before I let you do that, though, I am going to do like a little kind of a humble brag on your behalf, because I know you are very humble. For anyone who's kind of been following along, first time you and I got together was exactly a year ago, actually, June, here in Vancouver, where you got on stage at my event. The stock at that time was trading had tipped to 38 cents, 39 cents, 40 cents, something like that. Now, you guys are hitting all-time highs very recently. I think the stock closed, it's between, and depending when you're watching this, it was in the 160, 170 range. That's a substantial run. You guys have continued to raise capital. You continue to make incredible partnerships. Kudos to you for putting yourself out there. You're obviously like a very active CEO with investors, which is incredibly important. So setting you up there, just teeing it up for you to knock it out of the park. Message to investors: why should somebody be looking at your stock right now and considering making an investment?
So there's a secret that most retail investors in the world don't know that most Silicon Valley venture capital firms do. Having grown up in California, in Silicon Valley, working in tech for the last 30 years, also my partner and I, after we started the company in 2018, we wrote a book in 2019 called The Spatial Web, How Web 3.0 Will Connect Humans, Machines, and AI to Transform the World. And the idea of the web of spaces and the world that we're operating, powered by AI and robotics and, holographic and immersive information, guided and driven and generated by AI, is at the heart of that. Now, when we were doing our research, we noticed a trend that we outline in the book. But here's the basic trend. Every 15 years, the entire technology stack shifts. So it used to be all, computer was the size of a room. You had IBM and a couple companies that were able to have these, super computers, and companies would rent time on those. Apple and a handful of others had this idea, Steve Jobs, that everyone could have their own computer, personal computer. 1977, Apple starts, right? And that's the dawn of the personal computing revolution. 15 years later, 1992, the World Wide Web emerges. Now, it's not about programs on your local machine. It's about websites on someone else's server somewhere else in the world. Now you have this network of computers. And obviously, if you'd invested in any of those companies at the time, Apple or Microsoft or any of those that started, that would have been great. You'd see 10,000 plus X return. If you'd able to invested in Google or Amazon or any of the sort of early Web 1.0 companies, you would have hit it out the park. Well, venture capital emerged out of this. 15 years later, 1992 to 2007, Steve Jobs walks out again, introducing iPhone. Beginning of Web 2.0, social, mobile, local, right? And all of a sudden, it's all about user-generated content. It's not about websites anymore. It's about apps. Well, if you'd invested in Postmates or DoorDash or Pinterest or any of these companies, you would have seen 1,000x returns. But you probably didn't for a reason I'll get to at the end. That was 2007. 15 years later, 2022, the whole stack is shifting again. Instead of the data in the cloud, data is moving to the edge where the device is. It's not about apps, it's now about AIs. AIs are the new apps. And just like there's millions of apps out there today for everything, there's going to be millions of smarter apps for everything. And so this shift is very reliable. Now, as a retail investor, you don't get to play this game. Here's why. For the first 7-8 years, about half of that 15-year period, venture capital and private equity and strategics make these investments. That's why Microsoft put $10 billion into OpenAI. And in fact, a $300 million round just closed with a bunch of the VCs that didn't get in, just as a little thank you favor to some friends. But you don't get to get in there, right? Right. There is no opportunity as a retail investor to get that 1,000x game. You don't get to play that game, rarely. They get to play this game all the time because they will then pick the winners. After 7.5 years, those companies will go public. And then after they get their 1,000+X return, then you get to play. Well, Versus is the only company in the AI space that's a pure play AI company, many of whom have less revenue than us, that have less market traction, less solid technology, smaller moats, with billion-dollar valuations who haven't even released the product yet, that have been invested in by these venture capital companies because you want to place a bet when the wave goes up. In fact, you don't even have to be smart. You can be dumb on the way up and smart on the way down. So number one is, do you want to catch the biggest technology wave in history and the financial benefits that will come from that? If the answer is yes, then where are you going to do it? You can invest in Microsoft? That's probably not going to do it. Oh, you're going to invest in OpenAI? Oh, you can't. You invest in any one of these 100 startups that have all got several $1 billion just rolled into in the last 120 days? Oh, you can't. It's all VC backed. So there are very few pure play, and albeit horizontal, not just vertical, because a lot of those vertical ones are going to get killed, AI plays in the market. And so we are the only player in the space that is in the public markets, which we did on purpose because we didn't want to play the VC game. That is a horizontal play, meaning we're a platform upon which others are going to build these million AI, applications and solutions on top of, and we take our fees. That is available for you to invest in. So the question shouldn't be why should you buy or invest in Versus. The question is, why shouldn't you? If you are interested in having a shot at the kinds of returns that VCs get, this is why we don't look like the rest of your portfolio. The only question is, what percentage of your portfolio should you be allocating to the category? And some portion of that, I would argue, should be allocated towards us. And by the way, you get one last benefit that the VCs don't ever get. The VCs have to wait 7-8 years for liquidity.
Sure.
You have liquidity the whole time. So you have a better risk profile. You've got a horizontal opportunity with a company who's not just doing a vertical solution. We're right in the Goldilocks zone of not being born yesterday, but also not being 20 years old or 40 years old and just adding AI to our products, like the multi-trillion-dollar, big tech companies. So this is like the sweet spot as an investor. It just tends to be something that you would never look for or notice or see because the rest of your portfolio looks completely different. And that's why I would invest.
Well, I love it. It's always so compelling. So with that said, if you do want to invest, again, if you're an American, VRSSF, Canadian, VERS.NE. You can trade it on pretty much any trading app. If you have any issues, by all means, reach out to us and we can help you figure it out. Gabe, a pleasure as always. Thank you so much for giving me your time, for giving the audience your time. As always, I can't wait to do it again. I'm just going to say thank you. And that's it from me.
Thank you, Kevin. Great to see you again. Talk later.